This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and pleased to have as our guest today in the studio with me, Alexa Gearhart. Alexa has had a number of roles in recent years that we'll get into when we hear a little bit more about her history, but let me say first, Alexa, welcome.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be here and meet with you guys.
Well, it's our pleasure. You've come to us highly recommended as one who can talk about things that sometimes don't get talked about, but go to the heart of who we are and how we live life. Let me, by way of a short introduction, let our listeners know that you were one of the founders and served as the director of a Christian school in Moore County, yes. The Fellowship Christian Academy. Did I get that right?
Absolutely, yes. Back in 2017, I had the opportunity to help start a private Christian school, Fellowship Christian Academy, at our church, and it's just been an incredible experience to watch that ministry grow.
And you served, after serving as director, as the admissions and advertising person in charge?
Yes. So as the school grew and my family, our lives changed a little bit, which some things I'll share soon. I was able to step back from that director role and hand it off to others who could lead the school, and I could still serve in a ministry that was near and dear to my heart. So I've done admissions and advertising for the last few years, and just recently stepped back to primarily just do social media for a ministry that I still love.
You came to our attention because of, speaking of ministry, a ministry that you recently started called Even in the Valley, and we'll talk more about that. But tell us, before we go there, about Camp Duncan in Aberdeen and the role that you and your husband play there and have played.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and back in 2013, I married my husband, Brad, and I joined him down here in North Carolina. He was working at Cameron Boys Camp, located in Cameron, and that is a wilderness therapeutic camp for at-risk boys. It's ministry-based. We're part of Baptist Children's Homes of North Carolina, and he worked there. I helped a little bit with education until 2019. Chief Paul Daly retired from Camp Duncan. And again, we are a wilderness therapeutic camp, but instead of for boys, we now work at an at-risk camp for girls. So my husband's world turned pretty drastically, working with all boys in the woods to working with girls. But we moved to Aberdeen and live on the property at Camp Duncan. It's a very unique ministry, reaching teens who, for whatever reason in their life, have had a hard time. And our ultimate goal is to reunite them with their families. And we provide them with resources to do that, and ultimately with the hope of Christ.
Your background educationally, you're a graduate of Messiah College, I understand. Does your academic background fit into your work at Camp Duncan or your living at Camp Duncan?
So I briefly served as the education consultant and helped support Jason Sullivan, who does the education for the camps. But the education that the kids receive when they're at the camp is very hands-on. And so while I am spouse to my husband, who's the director, I do get to plug in and meet with the girls from time to time. And we love to share what we're learning about. I homeschool my children currently. And we love to share with the girls what we're learning and what they're learning as well.
And education was your academic background?
Yes. My degree is elementary education and special education.
In fact, I understand that you started in North Carolina teaching at one of the public elementary schools.
My first year in the classroom was a fourth grade teacher. I think I had 28 students that year. Lots of students kept me busy, and my heart is for education in all that I do. And I'm thankful to be in a season at home with my kiddos right now. But I don't think education will ever be far from what I do.
Tell us what Even in the Valley is.
Sure. So back in the fall of 2021, we unexpectedly lost our son, our third child, to stillbirth. And through our faith and the community that surrounded us, this ministry, Even in the Valley, formed. And my hope through Even in the Valley is to provide families who are walking through miscarriage or stillbirth or infant loss with faith-based resources and support as they grieve their children. I want them to know they're not alone and that there's a God who loves them and cares for them.
I gather the name itself, Even in the Valley, has some connection perhaps with Psalm 23?
Yes, absolutely. We know that even in the valley of the shadow of death, that God is good and that he comforts us, and that he's there. Just because we face circumstances in our lives that bring us to our knees and that break us doesn't mean that there's not a hope. We can still hold on to the hope we have in Christ, and that God is present. And when we let him, he can comfort us.
I want to have you tell us more about your personal experience and story here in a little bit, but tell us about this first song that you've selected, Crying in the Chapel.
Absolutely.
Why that song?
So as you can maybe draw from what I shared about my life, our faith is incredibly important to us. And I know for some people, faith or religion might just be a Sunday morning faith in that we go to church and we put on our smiles and we wear our Sunday best. But for our family, both through the loss of our son and through our time in the ministries at the camp, we know that God is the ultimate source of hope for us. And so the lyrics, you'll search and you'll search, but you'll never find no way on earth to gain that peace of mind. Take your troubles to the chapel, get down on your knees and pray, then your burdens will be lighter and you'll surely find the way. That just speaks to our faith, and through all the trials that we've been through and that we've seen our campers at camp go through and our students, we believe that the Lord is the source of hope and strength.
And nobody sings that song much better than Elvis Presley.
Sure.
Let's hear it.
Sure.
Crying in the Chapel by Elvis Presley.
You saw me crying in the chapel, the tears I shed away, and you'll surely find the way.
If you're just joining us, our guest today is Alexa Gearhart. Alexa, among a number of other things, has fairly recently started a ministry called Even in the Valley. And Alexa, I would note for the benefit of our listeners that your visit with us actually coincides with Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, the month of October. And I did a little research, a little history, and I probably am saying some things that you know well, but it was in October of 1988 that President Reagan designated that entire month as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. I understand, too, that since then, all 50 states have a yearly proclamation in honor of those who've lost a child during pregnancy or during infancy. And, of course, that ties into your story. Why don't you start, if you would, telling us about your kids, all four of them, and maybe with a little focus after you name them on Hudson.
Sure. So my husband and I have been incredibly blessed with four beautiful children. We have a daughter, Rowan, who's now 8, a daughter, Cora, who is 6. We have our son, Hudson, who is in heaven, and we have a little baby girl, Bryn, who will be 1 here this month in October. And
you've got a busy household.
I do. I have a busy household. I homeschool 2 of them.
I was going to say, especially homeschooling.
They keep me on my toes. But we had Rowan and we had Cora, 2 healthy pregnancies. And in February of 2021, we found out that we were expecting again, and we were thrilled. Big sisters could not wait. And we were even more thrilled when we found out we were having our first son. We named him Hudson, and we counted down the days until Hudson would be here with us. And as we got closer and closer to delivery, we had our hospital bag packed. One day I noticed he wasn't moving quite as much. So we headed into the doctor's office, and an ultrasound confirmed that Hudson's heart was no longer beating. And as you can imagine, Alan, our world just crumbled in that instance. It wasn't something we were expecting. And our hearts were shattered. Something so sacred had been taken from us. And we relied very heavily in the moments and days and hours that followed on our faith and our trust that we had in the Lord and on our community. And we delivered our son the next day on October 13th in a silent delivery room. And I will never forget speaking the words to my doctor as I held my son, that my son's life was not in vain and that I serve a good God. And in that moment, I don't think I knew fully what I was saying. But as we're coming up on 2 years since we've lost Hudson, and I've seen the Lord work through his passing in many different ways in my own life and in my husband's life and those around us. And even in the valley was born through our reliance on the Lord and our community to pull us through those early days of grief.
Well, it seems entirely inadequate for me to say anything like, boy, I'm sorry. And I know you have learned that you're not the only one who's gone through such an experience, but you know better than anybody how hard it is.
Yep. I tell people all the time that we found ourselves in a club that you don't want to be a part of. And people reach out to me and ask, my friend just lost a baby, or my sister just got a terminal diagnosis for her child. What do I say? And I tell them there's no right words. I lost a child and I still don't know, what to say. But just to be there for them and to love them and to give them a space to talk about their child. And I guess through people reaching out to me, I also have found that I find healing in sending them resources that were valuable to me. And so that's what I've been doing, just sending care packages and books and letters to let people know you're not alone in your grief and in your hurt. I've been there. I know your pain, and the Lord is good through it all.
You were telling me before we came into the studio that you've done a fair amount of writing that it turns out, I'm sure has been good therapy for you, but as it turns out, it has really spoken to a lot of people, somewhat to your surprise.
Yes, absolutely. When we lost Hudson, I knew that because we lost him when I was 38 weeks pregnant, our loss was very visible. Was very pregnant and then was not, bringing our child home with us. And having been involved in the schools and the camps, we knew that a lot of people would be grieving with us. And so I felt compelled to just be open and honest about the grief that I experienced in losing our child, and began taking to social media as a form of, like you said, therapy for myself, but also other people have experienced the same thing. And I believe that the Lord used my words to bring comfort to them. And so each month in the year after Hudson passed, we just wrote about what we were experiencing and the pain and the hurt, but also the peace and the comfort that we found in the Lord. It's just been really, really neat to see the Lord at work.
You speak about the comfort that the Lord has brought you and sharing that with others. Boy, it reminds me of exactly what Scripture says in 2 Corinthians about comforting those who are suffering with the comfort with which you have been comforted by God.
Absolutely. I think in this broken and fallen world, we are all going to come across trials, whether it's the loss of a child or maybe a marriage or a disease or an illness. There's going to be hard things in this world. And God tells us we're going to face troubles and trials, but that he's overcome the world. So I will, every day of my life, speak of his goodness when we're on the mountaintops and we're in the valleys too.
Have there been instances where people have come to you, maybe surprisingly, and told you about their own experiences?
Absolutely. So one Sunday after church, I had spoken a little bit about Hudson, and I found a group of women sort of gathered around me after the service, and I could tell they were wanting to talk. And I noted that a lot of the women had gray hair, so I assumed that maybe they wanted to comfort me. But woman after woman came up to me and shared of a loss maybe that she had in her life. And for many of them, it was a loss they hadn't spoken of. And I think generationally speaking, miscarriage and stillbirth and infant loss, maybe it was something that these women tucked to the side and didn't speak of their children. And that broke my heart. Having been so vocal about our loss and having had a community that rallied around us, I couldn't imagine carrying that hurt without the community that we had. And so I pray that whether if someone lost their child last week or 30 years ago, that they can find comfort in the Lord and speak of their child too, because their life mattered.
Tell us, Alexa, about this next song that you've selected,
Sure.
Tears in Heaven.
Absolutely. Well, I had to crowdsource a little bit and reached out to my parents about a song that that they might like to honor Hudson. And the song Tears in Heaven is what they sent to me. And when I played the lyrics, I could resonate so deeply with what Eric had written.
This is Eric Clapton we're talking about.
Yes, Eric Clapton, and the words that he had written as he was questioning, would his child recognize him in heaven? And you shared with me that he actually wrote this song after he lost a child himself. And so
his 4-year-old son fell off a balcony in New York.
Yeah. And I can just connect with him through these lyrics and what he said about, would you hold my hand? Would you help me stand if I saw you in heaven? And the peace for our family. Beyond the door, there's peace, I'm sure. And I know there'll be no more tears in heaven. In the book of Revelation, God tells us that one day he's going to wipe away every tear, and that there won't be tears in heaven. And so while we can connect with Eric Clapton in his grief, we also know that there's coming a day when those tears that we've cried so many will be no more.
Let's hear it. Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. Alexa, it's pretty clear that your faith in conjunction with community have really been what has motivated you and
Absolutely
made things work for you.
Yeah, both have been a source of strength for our family, for sure.
Well, speaking of community, tell us a little bit more about what's going on with Even in the Valley, both near term and maybe aspirationally long term.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and that also happens to be the month that Hudson was born. And so we're excited that on October 14th at 3 p.m., we're going to be hosting a remembrance walk out at Camp Duncan around a beautiful lake for families to just gather and remember their children and press into the Lord through worship and through a guest speaker. So that's the thing I have most, I guess, presently on my horizon for Even in the Valley. But in addition to that, I plan to continue creating care packages and sending them out to women as they reach out, having experienced loss. I hope to get connected with the local hospital. I'm connected with the pregnancy center and local churches just to have resources available when you find yourself in those early days of grief. Looking for resources to support yourself is far from your mind. And again, we just want to be there to tell people you're not alone in your grief. And there's a God that can and will sustain you. So our plans are just to continue proclaiming his goodness and speaking into people's lives in the avenue that he's given us through Hudson's life.
If people would like more information, where can they go? What would you recommend?
Sure. For the walk specifically, they can visit www.myevent.com/Even in the Valley. And they can register to walk with us. If you can't join us, we are providing a virtual option where we will have the program that we're doing virtually. And there's also a spot where maybe you've lost a child and you just want to submit their name to have their name read aloud. If you go on the website and do that, we'll read their name and honor them on October 14th.
This is for the Remembrance Walk,
yes,
which is happening again at Camp Duncan in Aberdeen.
Yes, we have a beautiful lake, just a very healing, peaceful place for families to gather.
Where is Even in the Valley headed longer term in terms of its maybe legal standing, we'll call it?
Sure. As soon as we have our walk and things sort of slow down from that, we are working towards becoming established as a nonprofit in the state of North Carolina. And
a 501c3.
Yes, 501c3 in the state of North Carolina. And I'm looking forward to kind of having that completed. I think the paperwork and legal side might be a little intimidating to me, but I'm excited to have that accomplished and just to press in and see where the Lord takes this ministry.
Well, Alexa, we're a little bit short on time, but tell us about this third song that you've selected.
Absolutely.
Why, and actually, with this third song, you're taking us back a little bit in terms of musical history. Why You'll Never Walk Alone by Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Yes. As I think we've hit on, community has been incredibly important to us, and we were carried by our community. And so that's sort of the heart behind Even in the Valley. I don't want people to walk through this valley or this season alone. And the words walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. I just pray that maybe a listener today, hears that they're not alone in their grief and in their pain. Through our ministry, Even in the Valley. And
we'll give credit to Rodgers and Hammerstein. And this, as you probably know, comes from a Broadway musical, Carousel. Yes. Alexa, it's been a real privilege talking with you, and I thank you for sharing your personal experience in such a special way, and commend you for what you're doing and trying to reach others and be a resource for others who have experienced similar situations.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate you having me out and what you guys do through Grace Notes and just bringing some hope to the world and through things that people are doing in our community, whether it's Even in the Valley or other organizations. Thank you for the opportunity.
Our privilege. We certainly wish you all the best with Even in the Valley. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let's hear it. You'll Never Walk Alone by Jerry and the Pacemakers.
When you walk through a storm,